Hey y'all, what's up? This is Chemistry. We're blessed and highly favored here. And today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about mentorships and support systems. And this episode is called How Support Systems Shape Your Life. But aside from that, let's get into shapoppin, shall we? Also, one thing I want to say, and I'm not sure if I said it last time, but I'll definitely say it now. I don't want people to be confused, perplexed, confused as of like, oh, you used to make this kind of content. Why are you doing this, that, and this? Oh my gosh, she's brainwashed now, or whatever, or whatever some people will say. Um, I have been a Christian for a good amount of time, but the only difference was back then, I wasn't as bold or like out there with it as I am now. But to be fair, there's a lot of stuff that I was dealing with back then. I want people to understand that when they come on this channel, I still have hobbies, the same hobbies and interests and so on, but I view them from a Christian perspective because I'm a Christian. So I don't want people to come on here and think, "Oh my gosh, she's changed and she's brainwashed and blah 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 now and do do do." So I'm a that's all I'ma always say that, and I'ma just leave that be. But if that's not really understood, respectfully, it is what it is. I'm, I'm sorry. I have a tendency to laugh a lot. Yeah, but it's like it is what it is. But I'm gonna give y'all the backstory. So after, I think it was like in the middle of editing the fourth episode, and I was like, what should I do? What should I talk about now? Because I think I started to run out of stuff to talk about. Because something I noticed with like a good portion of like podcasts and stuff, and don't mind me, I'm kind of just clicking around on stuff right now, but something I noticed a lot with different podcasts, whether it's Christian or not, is when people run out of stuff to talk about, they go straight into pop culture to the point of where they end up talking about or gossiping about people's situations and like, especially like with celebrities. And I don't know, this is just cringy to me to kind of put your mouth on other people's situations that you also most likely have like went through. Cause like the other day on Facebook, I was just chilling and somebody, I guess someone was talking about this one celebrity that she ended up having a kid with this one guy and they broke up and everybody was talking bad about it, and internally I was like, that kind of makes no sense to kind of put your mouth on their relationship when you also did the same thing, but the only difference is that you're not famous. So let's let's not let's not try to put our mouths on other people's situations unless you are telling the truth and it's coming from a place of uplifting and praying for said person. Because the girlies, I be seeing the girlies doing the same thing and making the same mistakes. But the only difference is, I don't know what it is about society, but people have this really big thing where people like to make fun of or gossip about people's public situations that those same people probably are doing in like private that nobody knows about. And that's very strange. So I was praying. I was just like, okay, okay, God, I don't really know what to talk about. Like what should I talk about for this one? And I had heard talk about mentorships and support systems. And then I thought of a title, and I'm just like, I don't really know what a title is. I don't know what to have as a title. So I was thinking about it and I was like, ha ha ha. How support systems shape your life. So then I was told to read on three mentor mentee relationships in the Bible, which were David and Samuel, Elijah and Elisha, and Joash and Jehoiada. And I was reading them, and it was, it's just, I don't know. It really warmed my heart, and it also taught me a lot of stuff. But we're gonna jump into the first one, which is David and Samuel. But by technicality, how David and Samuel intertwine is really like two mentor mentee relationships in one, because it's not just David and Samuel, it's really Eli and Samuel, and then Samuel and David. So it's like, in a sense, Samuel was involved in like almost three mentor mentee relationships, where Samuel was like a mentee when he was like a kid, and then he was the mentor two times when he got older. But we gonna dive into that first, right? So we're gonna start with how Samuel came to be, because I don't know why, how, like, Samuel's birth was like a very interesting one for me. It was cool. So Samuel's dad Elkanah has two wives. So you got Hannah and Peninnah. So Peninnah already had kids with Elkanah. But Hannah wasn't able to have kids. And any chance Peninnah got, she was literally picking with Hannah, like teasing and picking with Hannah, and was like, "Oh, look at me with my round belly. I can have kids, but you can't nah." And internally, I'm just reading it, and I'm just like, "Why are you like? What is wrong with you? Like, why are you making fun? Why are you making fun of Hannah because she's infertile at the moment, or just in general? Why are you making fun of her for that? That's real strange, but okay." And every year, like on a annual basis, they will go up to Shiloh, and they would go to pretty much like do a sacrifice and like fellowship and so on. And hold on, I'm looking it up. So yeah, so Shiloh pretty much is like an ancient city and like a sanctuary or a place in ancient Israel that's like located in like Samaria. And around that time, Shiloh was like one of the main places where like Israelites and Jewish people would go to worship before the first temple in Jerusalem was built. So after Israel, you know, had I'm sorry, so after Israel, was beefing with Canaan and took over Canaan, so the tabernacle was moved to Shiloh, and it remained there for a good portion of the time. Right? All right. So that's a little backstory about Shiloh. But so they would go to Shiloh every year to pretty much do, to do like sacrifices and so on, and like do fellowship and so on. So there is a priest there named Eli that was pretty much that was one of the judges, and he was also a priest at the time. So they would go there every year just to do that. But this particular year, when they would go to Shiloh, there was like one major difference. So any other year they would go there, Peninnah would, pop off, would make it fun of Hannah for not being able to have kids. And it was to a point of where Hannah was like depressed, like she was upset about it, to where she didn't eat. And Elkanah had to kind of like be like, "Hey, what's the problem? What's going on?" or whatever. But this year, she did it again. But Hannah was just like, "All right, I ate my dinner and everything, so I'm finna go pray." So she went to the doorpost or somewhere where of the building or the place that Eli was at, and Hannah was crying. She was bawling her eyes out, and she was praying to God for a son. And she said, if you give me a son, I'm gonna dedicate his whole life to you." And Eli, Eli comes to the doorpost and pretty much like accuses Hannah of being drunk. And Hannah was like, "No, I'm very much sober," and pretty much explains the whole situation to him. So after Hannah finishes explaining the whole situation to him, Eli pretty much gives her the confirmation that God is going to give her a son, and that son was Samuel. So Hannah went from being infertile to being fertile and being able to have kids. So, and then his whole, pretty much like his whole childhood, he would attend services, and the person that was like the head or like in charge was Eli the priest. So Samuel is growing up his whole life. He constantly has favor, favor from God in everything he does. Like he's preaching, he's like, talking to people and preaching to people about God like as a little kid at this point. And it was one moment where Eli was being rebuked by God and being called out because Eli was not holding his kids accountable. Like his kids was doing whatever they wanted to do, and it was just out of pocket. Like as a matter of fact, like Eli's sons, I think what they were doing is they were pretty much just like being big bags. Not even just being big bags, but they literally like they didn't follow protocol. They slept with like two of the women that was like in the front and so on. Like everything that God gave them instructions on what to do, they did the very opposite. And I think you could find that in First Samuel chapter 2, verses 12 through 36. And God was scalping, I mean just scalping Eli down to the point of where he was like, yeah, both your sons, it's a wrap for them. It's gonna be a wrap for you, and it's gonna be a wrap for your sons. And you can sit and try to sacrifice and try to pray your way out of this happening, but there's nothing you could do. It's set in stone. It is what it is. Like it was to a point of where they was heinous. They was heinous. They stole from God. They was stealing offerings. Like they, I was reading it and I was like, hey, yo, I'm like, what y'all doing? But I can't even say nothing because at the same time, there's a good portion of people that's like really in the body of Christ that kind of does the same thing. So it's like I had to stop myself there. I'm like, I'm like, yikes. So it was to a point of where Eli pretty much was laying down, just chilling. Samuel was also there laying down, chilling. And Samuel was being called multiple times by God, but Samuel thought that it was Eli that was calling him. And Samuel was like, hey, what is it? And then Eli was like, I didn't call you. So go lay down. And he constantly was hearing God until he realized that, okay, if Eli's not calling me, it must be God that is calling me. Like it was to a point of where Eli realized it before Samuel realized that it was God calling him. Cause it was in First Samuel 3:9 where he literally says, so Eli told Samuel, go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. That's exactly what happened. But the crazy part was God told Samuel exactly everything that was going to happen to Eli and his family and gave him a vision. Because in the Bible, I think later on, yeah, like later on when Samuel gets older, he's known pretty much or considered a seer. But God exposed everything to Samuel. And Samuel was nervous to tell Eli. So it was to a point where Eli was like, yeah, you can like, so what did God tell you? And Samuel was like, no. And then Eli was like, you don't gotta hide it from me. Just, yeah, like, just tell me. So Samuel told him everything. And Eli was like, it is what it is. God is good. Everything is going to, be according to his plan. It is what it is. So after that, Samuel, once again, Samuel gets older and he still has favor from God throughout his entire life. So it gets to a point of where Israel, the beef between Israel and, you know, the Philistines are like, it's really starting to cook. It's starting to heat up. Cause I think, mind you, I think this is around the time that the Philistines had stole the ark. Yeah, I think it was around that time where they stole the ark. So, hold on. I'm following with my notes, and I'm also trying to do this based on like memory. But the thing that was like very interesting was around the time, really before I go into the time skip, around this time, it was pretty much being set in place that Eli was eventually gonna get, dethroned as a priest, and then Samuel was pretty much being like set in place and so on, right? So it's to a point of where Samuel is like, okay, well, Israel needs a king. So I don't know who it's supposed to be. So it's to a point of where a man named Saul is chosen to be king. And I think around this time, Eli passes away. His sons, him and his sons pass on the same day. And one of the women that Eli's sons has a kid with also dies. And I forgot their name, but the meaning of the child's name means the people have no glory, I think, or something like that. But yeah, let me check really quick. Okay, yeah, I had to make sure because Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas, they had died in war, and around this time, the Philistines and the Israelites fought, and the Philistines stole the ark. Right, they stole the ark of God. So then Eli heard the news, and woo wee, it was a wrap. So he broke his neck. I mean, snapped it. It was a wrap. He died. So then Phineas's wife heard the news and she went into labor and she died. And you can find this in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verses 19 through 21. So the son's name was Ichabod, which means the glory has departed. My bad for what I had said a few minutes ago. I had to correct myself and make sure. So around this time, it's to a point of where Saul is being, given pretty much given her like anointed as king. And Samuel is currently the judge now. And he has a 47-year reign. So the problem is when Saul starts to, Saul starts to get a little crazy and start doing his own thing. It strays away from God to the point of where Samuel is seeing this in real time, and it's like, Saul, why is you crashing out? Like, why? Like, what's going on? And Samuel was grieving and got to a point of where he regretted, even putting Saul in place. So God was like, what's the point of grieving? We gotta move on. We gotta keep it pushing. So Samuel goes to Bethlehem because he tells, you know, God tells Samuel that the next king after Saul is pretty much gonna be one of the sons of a man named Jesse. And Jesse stays in Jesse is a Bethlehemite. So mm, so this is where we're introduced to David. So David is the youngest of eight of Jesse's sons or Jesse's kids. And Samuel and David don't link up, you know, they didn't link up until around the time that Saul was possessed by a demon and he needed somebody that plays, music or just plays the harp. And David was like one of the only people in his family, and I think the only person in his family that was musically talented. So they, they give him a little travel bag or whatever and set him on his way, and he plays the harp and pretty much exercises the demon out of Saul's body just by playing the harp. And you could find that in 1 Samuel, I believe 16:23. So then shortly after that, David pops up again and fights Goliath, but it wasn't necessarily David that fought him, that was the first one to attempt to fight him. It was really his brothers. So David's brothers was like, "Oh, we big and strong. Yeah, we got him." and they saw Goliath, they was like, no, I don't know about that one. Because Goliath issued a challenge. It was like, okay, if any one of y'all can kill me, the Philistines will be our slaves. But I doubt that's going to happen. So let's get it popping. The only person that stepped up to the plate was David. And David was like, you're talking all this smack. And you're trying to, you're trying to say that your quote unquote gods are going to help you. But God is on my side. God can make the impossible possible. And David picked up that slingshot and that rock and yeeted it like a bullet and killed Goliath and took his head. And it's crazy. That this whole part is crazy to me because David literally told Goliath to his face, this 9 foot, I mean tall giant man, that not only is God gonna help me beat you, but I'm gonna behead you as well. And that exact thing happened. So David went all the way back to the king and literally brought the head of Goliath. So they had saw like, oh, David, David got, a little book back to him. Okay. Okay. So David grew in his ranks. And just like with Samuel, um, David has a lot of favor from God. And he's growing in his stature and he's growing in his ranks, not as a soldier but also as a man of God, to where David ends up marrying Saul's daughter, Michal. I don't know how you say it. Biblical names be beating me up really bad, but Michael Michal, something like that. And it's to a point where Saul starts to get jealous. Like Saul starts to get a little jealous. Not even a little. It just starts to get really insane. And I feel like when I was reading this, I feel like it really just like confirms like the one thought that I had a while back, where if people don't, check themselves when it comes to being jealous or like envious or whatever the case may be, like jealousy can easily turn into murderous intent. It is dangerous. It's very dangerous. So it's to a point of where Saul attempted to take David's life. And even before that, Samuel played a really big part in David's life, before David even became king, by giving him sound advice, by praying over him, praying prayers of protection and so on. And sadly, Samuel had passed away. And David started panicking and was like, oh no, what am I supposed to do now that, Samuel has passed away? And I'm kind of just on my own here. But in the end, what ends up happening is the one opportunity David had to kill Saul, David didn't do it. Because in the aftermath, Saul ends up being killed by his own, by his own wrongdoings. Because I think he got killed in battle. So afterwards, David is anointed as king of Israel, just as David, just as David was the person that Samuel had anointed to be king before it was even his time to be king in the first place. So yeah. So the thing I found like super beautiful about my bad. The thing I found really beautiful about the relationship between David and Samuel is that even though, Samuel was told that, this particular man was going to be king, it wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to anoint him and that's it. But Samuel really spent the time to get to know him. Yeah, but it's really sad because it was to a point of where David literally had to run and tell Samuel exactly what Saul was doing. And Samuel literally called upon God to literally hold Saul accountable for what he was doing. And he still continued to pursue David. after Samuel's death in 1 Samuel 25. And also another thing that I found really beautiful about, the pretty much the whole situation between David and Samuel is that amongst, amongst I'm sorry. So the thing that I find really, really, I don't know, the thing I find really cool about it is despite all the stuff that David was going through because of Saul, not only was Samuel praying for him, but David gained a genuine friend in Saul's son Jonathan. And it really just goes to show that, like, when you have people in your life that really care about you and you have the favor of God, especially like with godly friends and so on, like, it doesn't matter what adversaries try to come against you, it literally will not work at all whatsoever. And it didn't. Yeah, it didn't at all, because I believe Saul ended up dying in battle, but it wasn't necessarily like somebody killed him. He literally killed himself, and other people killed his sons, I believe. And then later on down the line, he becomes the king of Israel. David ends up being the king of Israel. And the thing that I found really interesting was there's like a really huge difference between David and Saul, because when Saul sinned, he didn't really care like that, and he didn't repent either, resulting in God pretty much disowning Saul. But when the prophet Nathan had confronted David about what he did, David repented for what he did. So when it comes down to it, it's so important to have, genuine friends and like great mentors in your life in general. Because just like Samuel had favor for all of his life, and he had, that mentor that was there for him, Samuel also ended up becoming a great mentor to David, to the point of where David realized that he wasn't perfect by any means, but in order to get through life, you need God. You need to repent, and you need to be honest with yourself. And then also having that support system, having good friends and having good leaders to steer you in the right direction helps you more than hurts you. So now we're going to talk about Elijah and Elisha, because this one, when I read it, it was a little crazy. It was crazy. There is a lot of stuff that I was realizing about it too. So you can find everything that I just read in 1 Samuel chapter 1 through 2 Samuel chapter 2, I believe. Yeah. So Elijah and Elisha, this whole thing starts in 1 Kings 17 through 19 and 2 Kings chapter 2 2 Kings chapter 2, and along with chapters 4 through 9. So I had to give some notes. I had to make a whole lot of notes. So I'm pretty much paraphrasing the notes based on like memory and so on, right? So around the time that Elijah came, there was like a lot of strong idolatry over the land. Like, people was, boy, they were out of control. So once Elijah came, he started cleaning house, and he was performing miracles in God's name, and really just ministering to people and so on. And at the same time, this is around the same time that Ahab married Jezebel and built a whole altar dedicated to Baal and Asherah, which were the same false gods that the Canaanites were worshiping, right? So it was to a point where Elijah was like, okay, so this what we doing, huh? Bet. So it was to a point, I'm sorry for laughing. It's just, this one had me scream. What I'm about to tell y'all had me screaming. So Elijah had told them get all the prophets of Baal, get them all, and bring them up to Mount Carmel. So, and we gonna really show you who's the real God. That's what's gonna happen. So they brought all the prophets of Baal. Cause I think I'm trying to remember how many. I'm trying to remember how many prophets it was, because it was a lot of them. But all the prophets of Baal came up to the mountain. So they had this whole little area. They had two, what's some call this? Two little like holes or something, where they had a little thing where you could like sacrifice animals and like grill them and stuff. So they had two things right there, right? And they were told, they had doused it in water. It was on fire at first, but they doused it in water. So they was trying to see if 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 the prophets of Baal, if their God was so real, they could make the little fireplace fire back up after being doused with water. So that didn't happen. And Elijah was like, maybe they sleep. Call your boys up. Maybe they sleep. Maybe they went on vacation. Call them again. I'm sorry. It's just that took me out. That took me out. Okay, so I had to make sure, right? So all of this is in First Kings chapter 18. So it's to a point of where Israel was going through a major drought. Like I said, Elijah confronts Ahab about all the stuff they was doing in, their idolatry. And Ahab got mad. And Elijah was like, bring them up. Bring all your prophets up. So it was 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asher. So it's a total of 850 prophets. So so it's to a point where Elijah was like, when y'all gonna stop flip-flopping? If the God that you serve is the God Almighty, follow him. But if the God that you worship is Baal, follow him. Right? That's the first thing he said before, before that whole thing popped off, right? But here's the crazy part. Here's the like in First Kings 18:27, Elijah was on their head. Elijah was like, maybe they sleep. Maybe they sleep. Y'all been hooting and hollering and dancing around this altar for a very long time, and they did not answer. Wake them up. Shout louder. Maybe they're on vacation or something. So it was to a point where they started trying to do blood sacrifices, and nothing happened still. I'm like, that's crazy. So it's to a point of where once Elijah's sacrifice was ready, he was on go. He was like, all right, it's time to really show y'all who the real OG is. I'm finna show y'all the power of God. So it's to a point of where fire fell. Fire fell from heaven and consumed the burnt offering. And mind you, the whole sacrifice area on Elijah's side on both sides was doused with water. So if you put fire on it, it would immediately go out. That thing said boom. And all the people bowed down and declared God is Lord. But here's the crazy part. So Elijah had commanded the people of Israel to kill all the prophets. Right? So after this, the drought in Israel was over. But the thing about it, Jezebel was mad about it and had sent people to kill Elijah. That whole thing was crazy. So as Elijah was hiding out, there was a lot of stuff that was happening, and he had, I think it was like one situation where he was hiding out at this widow with, yeah, I think the lady was a widow, and It was just her and her son, and they didn't have nothing. And Elijah was like, hello, may I have some bread and water? And she was like, hold on, I got you. We don't really have, a lot, but we'll give you some. I'll make you some. I'll give me and my son, son some, and then we gonna die. That's it, because we ain't got nothing. But what ended up happening was through the woman, blessing Elijah with something to eat. She had an overflow of flour and everything she needed. So her and her son continued to live. So, but as Elijah was hiding out, because, Jezebel pretty much at this point, she was killing prophets that, God was using and so on. But after the whole event at Mount Carmel, she pretty much just goes ballistic and pretty much tries to have Elijah killed. So Elijah is hiding at the entrance of a cave and anoints this man named Hazael as the next king of Aram, and Aram is pretty much in the area where Syria is currently. So Hazael is the next king of Aram, because at the time that this is happening, there's a king named Ben Hadad, and he is the king of Aram. And I think Hazael was one of his assistants or something, I believe. And Jehu, he's not king yet, but he's going to be the next king of Israel. And Elisha is going to be the next prophet in Elijah's place, as Jehu and Elisha will execute anybody that Hazael doesn't take out. So, around the time that this is going down, Elijah's going on his journey, and Elisha is a farmer at the time. Elijah's chilling, plowing the fields, and so on. So Elijah pretty much just literally puts his cloak on Elisha, and Elisha was like, wait, 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 wait. Before we go on this journey, just let me do a few things. Just let me do a few things, and I'm gonna join you. So he sacrifices all of his oxen, because it was 12 yoke of oxen, I believe. So I had to look it up, but 12, yeah, so 12 oxen is literally like 24 oxen. It's pretty much just like 12 pairs of oxen. So it's like 24 oxes that he has. And I'm trying to look up the worth. Okay, so I was looking it up, right? So according to one calculation this one guy from Florida made, so and mind you, this is like back in 2014. So according to him, it's cattle, like cattle prices are like a good amount. So according to this person, they were saying that a bull, or pretty much like an ox, will weigh anywhere from like 1,500 for a smaller animal, or a large one in a poor condition. Ooh, excuse me. But a good size one in good condition will weigh around like a ton. So if you took half of that price per pound, you would have an animal worth $2,000. Hold on, I'm still looking it up. So I'm pretty much on farmhouseguide.com, just looking up stuff and like differences between oxen or oxes, cows, and bulls. So they didn't necessarily say the amount of an oxen, but they did say they're pretty much like a little more expensive than bulls. So they're saying a full grown bull, however, can cost between $3,000 and $5,000. So that's like 24. So Elijah had 24 of them, pretty much like 12 pairs or yoke of oxen. So 24, that's like $120,000. If that's how much those oxen cost, I can't imagine how much money Job had. Man, I'm sorry. It's just, I got sidetracked that fast. I'm just saying. So Elisha, Elisha had went and killed all the bulls, sacrificed them, cooked them, for the people, in his, I think in the city, as well as like his parents, had that good that farewell talk with him and just went along his way with Elisha. So at this time, they're traveling together and so on, and Elisha is pretty much like in this apprenticeship or mentor, mentee relationship with Elijah. So Elijah pretty much is taking him under his wing, teaching him everything there is to know and so on. And it's to a point in 2 Kings chapter 2 where Elijah knows that, at this point it's time for him to go. So he folds up his clothes and everything, and there's this big old whirlwind that happens. And okay, yeah. So he just folds his clothes and everything. He knows, he's like, yeah, it's time for me to go. And Elijah was saying to Elisha literally in the second verse of 2 Kings chapter 2, stay here, the Lord has sent me to Bethel. And all of this is going on, and then next thing you know, Elijah is like, if there's anything that you need to know or ask me or someone, please just ask before I go, before I'm gone, before I'm taken away from you. And Elisha said, let me inherit a double portion or a double blessing of your spirit. And Elijah was like, And he says in verse 10, you have asked a difficult thing. Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise, it will not. So, Elisha is still trying to, speak to him and get some of these things, understood. And is trying to prepare himself for what's about to happen. Because shortly after that, a whole chariot of fire and horses that was on fire appeared and snatched Elijah up. And it was a wrap. He was no more. And Elisha was grieving. I mean, just like literally just yeeted his garment and just tore it. Like he was grieving. And so Elisha, is trying to process like, man, he's really gone. Like what? Like what? So it's to a point of where right after Elijah is gone, Elisha, it's time for him to take up that mantle or that place as, just like Mordecai had told, Esther when, Haman was trying to do all the crazy stuff that he was doing. Perhaps, you're called for such a time as this. And that was Elisha's time. So a lot of the stuff that Elisha did, prophecies, works, etc., includes the purification and restoration of the water and fruitfulness in Jericho. This is shortly after Elisha pretty much was snatched up. And he also warned Ben-Hadad, who was the king of Aram at the time of his death, before it was time for him to go, and how, he was gonna die. He didn't necessarily, tell him that Hazael was the one that was gonna murder him, but he did say, yeah, it's a wrap. But this is the thing though, because around this time, Ben-Hadad was really sick, and the king literally had asked, like, hey, he literally asks Hazael to ask Elisha, am I gonna recover from this disease? And Elisha was like, yeah, you're gonna recover, but you're also gonna die though. And it was to a point of where Elisha pretty much had exposed to Hazael, like, yeah, I know that you are going to be the one that's gonna be king. But Ben-Hadad does recover. However, Hazael literally smothers Ben-Hadad to death and becomes king. So that whole thing was crazy. So there was that. Um, he healed Naaman, I think way, yeah, like a little before that. He restores the Shunammite woman's land, along with the birth and resurrection of the Shunammite woman's son. He restores a poisonous pot of stew and the whole nine. And throughout the entire time that he's performing, God is giving him the ability to perform all of these miracles and tell people about God and give prophecies and so on. Everything that he has ever learned, you know, came from Elijah, as God put Elisha in the place that he needed to be in order for Elijah to be his mentor, and for Elijah, you know, to be that person to steer Elisha in the right direction and be prepared to be the next prophet in line. So by the time that Elisha, was yeeted up, even though Elijah was a little distraught, he was also told in advance, and everything that Elijah ever taught him, was instilled in him, and so on. So it's to a point, like later on, Elisha, along with Jehu, both of them together, as well as all of the forces and soldiers that was under Jehu, because I think Jehu was a commander or a general at the time before he was king of Israel. It was to a point where they were responsible for taking down Ahab, Jezebel, and the people that was like under him, like under them, like their sons and so on. Like anybody that came from Jezzy and Ahab, they died. And it's crazy because that leads us into the third group, which is Joash and Jehoiada, right? And you can find, like I said, you could find this whole thing in First Kings chapters 17 through 19, and then Second Kings chapters 2 and chapters 4 through 9. Now, we're going to be talking about Jehoiada and Joash. So, we're going to start where we left off with Elijah and Elisha. So remember how I said Elisha and Jehu were the ones that was responsible for the death of Ahab as well as Jezebel, right? So around this time that Jehu is taking out all of Jezzy's people and Ahab's people, Ahab, I believe his daughter or granddaughter, Athaliah, is noticing that, Jehu is pretty much killing all of the not descendants, all of the people that came from like Ahab and Jezzy, and was like, okay, this could be my chance. This could be my chance to take over the throne, have my power or whatever, right? So at the time, Ahab had 70 sons in total. And Jehu, as well as the worshippers of Baal and Asherah, were killed. Just as God instructed and eventually said was going to happen through Elijah. So one of the sons that was killed, such as King, the biblical, like I said, the biblical names be getting to be King Ahaziah of Judah. Ooh, he was killed by Jehu, and I guess Athaliah was like, all right, it's my time to shine. For real, for real. So I think the person that was the king at the time, one of the kings that was the king at the time, which was King Joram or Jeroam, had had a few kids with Athaliah, such as King Ahaziah, just like I said. So that was one of the kids, for one of the sons of Ahab that was murdered, right? So in the aftermath, Atalia was like, okay, so I'm gonna take out all of the remaining royal children that has a claim to the throne so it can all be mine. So the only grandchild that she doesn't take out is Joash. Because Joash was saved by his auntie. Ooh, these biblical names, boy. So so Joash was saved by his auntie Jehosheba, who is the king. So Jehosheba was the sister of King Ahaziah and was the wife of the priest Jehoiada. So Jehosheba and Jehoiada, as well as, some of the people that Jehosheba has in place, pretty much hide Joash for 6 years as Italia was ruler temporarily at the time. So it wasn't until the 7th year where Joash becomes king, as Jehoiada at the time was pretty much devising a plan to reform and restore the bloodline and the legacy of David, you know, that eventually would take the throne away from Italia, as she was dethroned and killed. But before she was killed, when all of this was happening, she was like, oh my gosh, treason, treason, y'all stole the throne from me. How could you? And it's like, nobody stole the throne from you. You stole it from your grandchildren. So you're weird for that. But so Joash was so Joash was now king, and he had a 40-year reign. And throughout that 40-year reign, and really before he was even king, Jehoiada had a really big and huge part in Joash's life, as he was the main one that was responsible for Joash renouncing the same demonic altars that his father and grandmother, had in place, like, Baal, Asherah, so on. And, and, geez, and he was also the person that was really responsible for Joash listening and trusting in God, and not just his strategies or his reign, but also within his personal life as well. However, sadly, Jehoiada passed away when he was 130 years old, and Joash was 47. So afterwards, the princes of Judah and really bad influences, started getting in his ear. And just like with Saul, he strayed away from God and was later killed, and was succeeded by his son Amaziah. And sadly, Amaziah also followed in his father's footsteps. Now you can find this in 2 Kings chapter 12, the whole chapter, and then 2 Chronicles chapters 23 and 24. And the thing I found so interesting is with Jehoiada and Joash is that people, especially like mentors or so on, growing up, some of the first mentors we ever have are pretty much like parental figures, right? And sometimes those parental figures aren't necessarily like, our mothers or fathers. Maybe it's our grandmothers or grandfathers or adoptive parents or so on, but it's still a parental figure. And for me, it's beautiful how in the midst of Joash almost, possibly being killed by his evil grandmama, Jehoiada was the person, Jehoiada and his wife stepped in and saved his life and nurtured him and took care of him and sheltered him, and also made sure that he had proper discipline and had a relationship with God as well. And it really just goes to show that people that care about you, they won't just be there when it's convenient, but at the same time, they'll always be there for you to protect you out of harm's way. The same way that Samuel was for David, and the same way that Elijah was for Elisha. And I don't know, it's just the way that all of these intertwine for me is really interesting, because Elijah and Elisha, Elijah and Elisha intertwine with Jehoiada and Joash, because not only is Joash And Jehoiada, somewhat sort of interlinked with Ahab and Jezebel, because Atalia is associated and related to Ahab and Jezebel, but also Elijah and Elisha were responsible for kind of putting in place, Ahab and Jezebel being taken out. And then also David and Samuel as well, because by technicality, when you really trace down, the genealogy of someone, Joash is a part of the Davidic bloodline or legacy, right? I just found that like really interesting. That's all. So based on really all four, is really four, because it's Eli and Samuel, Samuel and David, Elisha and Elijah, and Jehoiada and Joash. There's like way more mentor mentee relationships in the Bible. But it really goes to show the significance. Like, it is so important to have proper mentors and having, great friends and a great support system in general. Because I feel like, depending on the people that you have in your life and that you listen to, it really makes or breaks, you as a person, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, it doesn't necessarily have to be relatives. It can literally be just like, oh, excuse me, it could be teachers, it could be, I don't know, like church leaders, etc. Like proper leaders have the ability to change people's lives, or like really like caring and cool people, like being there in your life changes your life in ways that like you would have never expected it, right? So, I'm nosy, and I like to look stuff up, right? So I was looking up some statistics and so on to kind of back this up a little bit. so from a business aspect, I was just looking up some stats. So there's like a stat or statistic or study that Harvard Business Review is doing in like June of 23. And according to them, like 75% of business executives credit their success to mentors. And recent, research that they were doing was showing that 90% of employees with a career mentor were happier at work. And then also as well, so some of the benefits of mentoring for like younger people, according to youth.gov, some of the benefits include increased high school graduation rates, lower high school dropout rates, healthier relationship and lifestyle choices, better attitudes about school as well as life, higher college enrollment rates and educational aspirations, enhanced self-esteem and self-confidence, stronger relationships with parents, teachers, and peers, improved interpersonal skills, even including, um, communication as well, and then a decreased likelihood of initiating drug and alcohol use, right? So, so in a lot of ways, um, geez, pretty much like I was saying, like parents and kids, like the parent kid relationship, but just parents in general, are really the first mentor, or support system experience that we have. And even according to a lot of studies that people do in the mental health field or just interpersonal field, um, a lot, the way that people go about specific relationships, or the way that people communicate with others, or how they, how their attitude is shaped about specific things, is really based on the type of relationship and experiences that we've had with our parents. So if we have parents that are extremely toxic, um a good portion of the time, the coping mechanisms or the things that we do or the way that we talk to people or our behavior, you know, echoes that in a lot of ways. Like, even in the Bible, like with the whole thing with generational curses or whatnot, I call them generational consequences, but it kind of echoes like the same sentiment of how the way the way you go about stuff and really dependent on the things that you do, it really shapes the people that come after you in like a lot of negative ways, or the sins that you partake in negatively affects the people that come after you, specifically your kids, right? Because like prime example, so man, literally just like I was saying, like verbatim, like with Joash, with when Jehoiada died, he's lost his way, and he strayed away from God, and the sins and the things that he did ended up being the same things that his son struggled with. And then David had a really big lust problem, especially when he decided to like fool around with a married woman, and he repented for it, but still. So in the aftermath, Solomon ended up having to struggle with the same thing that his father did, to the point of where he he literally had like 700 wives and 300 concubines, and all of these women led him to literally, and I mean literally, give sacrifices to false gods. Because I believe this was like in First Kings chapter 11 verses, because I had to make sure. I'm a really big, I wouldn't say hog, but I'm really big on like trying to like look it up and make sure. But it's literally like in the first 7 verses of First Kings 11. Because he literally built, just like with Ahab and Jezebel, he built a whole altar in dedication of these false gods, and did the same thing, and eventually repented for it. Because even in Ecclesiastes, because it's rumored that he was the one that wrote Ecclesiastes, and he realized that it wasn't all of that, all the women, the fame, you know and so on, meant nothing. Like, yeah, he was king, he was known for his wisdom, he was known like in general, he had a lot of wealth and so on, but it's like all of it meant nothing. Like, I ended up straying away from God. I ended up getting distracted. I ended up not being appreciative of life, and the understanding that you can have the ability to enjoy your life, but you should never stray away and forget about God, like ever. And so on, right? And man, it's the same way. And a lot of people don't realize, like, I feel like, especially parents, I feel like some parents don't fully realize that the behavior that you do, or the sins that you partake in, has the ability to affect and influence your kids in negative ways. So as you have kids and as you decide to do specific things, it's like, let the things that you do be positive, because at the end of the day, this isn't just a child. You're raising a whole human being that's growing to be an adult, that has to make their own decisions and have their own personal walk with God, or just in general, right? And so on. And just like it is with that relationship, just, I don't know, it's just, it makes a difference having people there that genuinely support you, whether it's friends, or whether it's family members, or even strangers. Sometimes it makes a huge difference. Like, for example, so my experience, geez, I guess I'll talk about like the negative, results of like bad company, because it says in the Bible that evil communication corrupt good manner, like verbatim. Okay, I had to make sure because it says that in First Corinthians 15:33. Be not deceived, evil communication corrupts good manners. So I think I was like in high school. I was in high school, and it was to a point, no, actually, it was way before high school. It was like when I was in elementary school, and there were these kids that I would befriend, and I thought they were really cool. And But little did I realize that like these people genuinely did not like me. And other people would come to me saying negative things about how these people that I thought were my friends were saying very negative things about me. And it really messed with my psyche and it messed with my self-esteem really bad. And then in high school, I ended up being friends with people that were basically the same way. But even though I had like really low self-esteem at the time, like the people that really helped me strengthen and really just like improve my self-esteem were like it was a few people in my life. And it was like it was three women in general, like to this day, that I can literally name off the dome, that literally helped me to become like the woman of God I am today. Like I'm not perfect by any means, but it's like I'm gonna always trust God in all things, to be the woman that He's calling me to be. So first and foremost, um, like it's none of these are in order. None of these are in order. Like these women just equally have had like a really big impact on me. So I'm gonna give them different names because I don't like to dox people or just put that information out there. I don't like doing that. Like even when I talk about people's comments, I'll literally blur their name out. I'll show what they said, but I'll blur their name out because I don't know. Even if there's somebody says something weird, I don't like to put nobody info out there. So let's just say I'm gonna give all these women like three different names. So if they end up hearing this, y'all have impacted me in ways that to this day I still think about. And sometimes it makes me cry a little bit. So let's just say I'm gonna name the first person Grace. So Grace is Grace is one of my Sunday school teachers when I was little. And to this day, just talking to her has always put me at peace. And I was always dealing with social anxiety growing up to where I hated talking in front of people. I hated it. It just made me nervous and I was scared. So just being in her class and just asking her questions and trying to get a better understanding of the lesson that I was learning in Sunday school, um even when I was nervous and I hated, I just hated it. I hated talking in front of people, just being in her class and so on. Even when I was standing in front of the whole church and having to say what I learned, just her being there, like just her being there, um, it made me feel validated and it made me feel less scared to talk to people and so on. And it boosted my self-esteem a little bit. And just talking to her made me feel like I was, like God loved me. Well, God loves me, and that I was valid and that I was good enough, even though people, labeled me as weird or whatever the case may be, because all that matters is that it's how God views us. It's like there's nothing wrong with being yourself, but at the same time, let it be, let you being yourself, let it be yourself in a way that God would be happy with, you know? And I would have conversations with her and, just having conversations with Grace and the two other women when I was really nervous and I was scared and I didn't really trust people as much because of the stuff that I had dealt with. Just talking to them made me feel like it was safe to let my guard down and talk to people about anything, because I was also a blabbermouth. If you couldn't tell now, if you couldn't tell that by now, but even then, I was a bit of a blabbermouth, and I was always curious about like everything. So if I wanted to talk about a specific thing, like I could always talk to, I could always talk to her or the or other two women about specific things. So like even to this day, like the other day, me and her were having a conversation about something that was really important. And um that conversation really validated and also gave me, a confirmation that of what God was trying to speak to me about. So another, so the next lady, I'm gonna name her Abigail. So Abigail was another Sunday school teacher of mine, and she was my Sunday school teacher when I was like, when I was like, when I was starting to, I think it was maybe like 15, 16, up until I was like 17. And just like with Grace, Abigail experienced some of the same things as I did when I was younger. And talk just like with Grace, talking to Abigail felt like I was safe, and that you know, I could put my guard down and actually talk to them about anything and everything. And the advice that they always gave me, you know, was always helpful. And just talking to them and just being in their presence made me feel comfy. And it made me, I wasn't as scared to stand in front of people and just say what I learned in church when it was time for me to present the stuff that I had learned. And every time I would see Abigail, every time I would see Miss Abigail, um she would always say, "That's my Sunday school student," and and it would make me laugh a little bit. But just ooh, why am I getting so emotional? But it meant the world to me when I was going through some of the stuff that I was going through. It meant the world to have two Sunday school teachers that just them being in my life really caused me to really keep God, to really be curious enough to want to have a relationship with God, even when you feel like, you're kind of doing your own thing and you're falling off. Cause I got older and I was doing my own thing and I was being super lukewarm, like super lukewarm. And it's like, it's just like that one verse in the book of Proverbs where it says, dang, I zoned out that fast. But it was a verse where it says, children, um, geez, why am I getting the scriptures mixed up all of a sudden? It's in Proverbs 18, where, hold on, I could have sworn I just saw it. Hold on, real quick. Okay, no, it's not in Proverbs 18. It was another verse that I was thinking about that was in Proverbs 18. So the verse, well, the scripture I was thinking about was train up a child in the way they should go, and when they get older, they won't depart from it. That's in Proverbs 22:6. And even though I was doing my own thing and I got older, it's like a lot of the scriptures and a lot of the sermons that I was listening to from my pastor and from my Sunday school teachers, it's like those things were instilled in me. And it's just like I could quote them and I could remember those verses just like that. And it always caused me to have conviction about, the things that I was doing. And then I got older and it's like all the stuff that I learned. Um, it's like I had an epiphany and I was like, I'm like, okay, okay, I get it now. So the last but not least, like I said, this ain't in order. So I'm gonna give all of them different names. It's all right. So I'm gonna give my pastor, I'm gonna give my pastor's name Priscilla. Cause I don't know. Like I said, I'm just giving the women of God biblical names. Cause it reminds me of in the Old Testament of like Priscilla and like I said, These biblical names be beating me up. Yeah, so I'm gonna name my pastor Priscilla because it reminds me of Priscilla and Aquila. I don't think that's how you say that man name, but pretty much it's like a just a reference to like the couple that was doing like ministry with Paul. I think in like Roman, wasn't it Romans? So they were referenced in Romans 16:3, I think. But I think that was in Acts chapter 18 when they were first like introduced or like discussed or whatnot. So, geez, I don't think words can fully express how much of an impact Pastor Priscilla has like made on me. Cause, geez, she literally has watched me like grow up from a kid to like to now. And I remember like being in church, and at the time, admittedly, when I was like a little kid, I was like one of those kids where I was like, oh my gosh, the people are hooting and hollering and doing helicopter and all types of stuff, but I didn't understand it the way that I do now. But one of the things I absolutely loved as a kid was just learning brand new things and just listening to people. And one of the things that I absolutely loved about church as a kid was listening to sermons, just listening to sermons. And no matter how hard hitting or soft spoken it was, I just loved listening to sermons and the things that, that God is using them to tell us or them as well. And I'll never forget when I think I was like in this really toxic relationship, and I was asking Pastor Priscilla advice on it, and she had told me, with you being with said person, if you're with this person and they don't ameliorate you, or pretty much it's just a bigger word for like pretty much bettering you, like if you being with that person does not ameliorate you or like better you in some shape, form, or fashion, you don't need to be with them. And it's like there's so many things, like even she was like one of the first people that I talked to or consoled in, you know when I openly got the courage to tell people about the trauma that I experienced as a kid. And it's just like as a mentor, I words can't even express how much like Pastor Priscilla like means to me. Like I feel like all the advice and all the sermons that she's taught has been instilled in me, to where some of the very things that she's said or discussed or talked about years ago has stuck with me now as a 26-year-old adult that's about to be like 27 next year, but it's stuck with me ever since. And I don't know, just thinking about it, just thinking about it got me emotional, because like she's one of the, she's definitely one of the other people where I was like kind of nervous to talk to people, and just talking to them made me feel like it was safe to talk to them. And I don't know, but yeah, just talking to them, just talking to all three of them, those three women specifically really helped me in my journey and my walk with God. And not even just my walk with God, but really just like me growing as a person, to where I got older and I started to fall in love even more with like learning brand new things, and really just like talking and not being scared of saying how I feel about certain stuff. So in a sense, they're kind of they're kind of responsible for like helping me grow to be the soft but boldly spoken person that I am today, right? Along with like some of the great friends and family, that I have that have like contributed to me just growing to be who I am today. Now my throat trying to drop again. It's the allergies for me. But cause man, boy. But I say all this to say that especially with like us adults, like in general, like really with me being like a big sister, the one thing I really, in a way, you're unknowingly a mentor to them without even realizing it, because like your younger siblings kind of like pick up on specific things and so on. And it's like for me as an older sibling, I don't know. It's not that I want to be a mentor. It's just I always want to steer them in the right direction, and I want them to be better people than me. Because you know how parents will say, "Oh, you're the role model. You're supposed to do bop boop beep beep bop," right? And for me, it ain't even really just like a mentor thing when I think about it. It's just for me, all I ever want, is for them to be better than me. So, in a lot of ways, when they want to do specific things, I'll pray about it. At the same time, I'll be like, if this is something you really want to do and it's safe, go for it. Because I spent a lot of my life wanting to do stuff and it was safe and it was fine, but I was scared. I let the opinions of other people cause me to shrink myself to where I didn't do specific things. And I didn't really have, you know, I didn't really have like the best mentorship, within some people. Because in some aspects, there were specific things that were kind of like neglected a little bit. But it's like with my siblings, when they're wrong, I'll always tell them when they're wrong. And if I'm wrong about something, I'll always tell them, if I'm wrong about something, you can always tell me that I'm wrong. And I'll repent for it and I'll apologize. But as y'all are getting older and y'all are growing, all I could ever want, all I could ever dream is for y'all to be successful and for y'all to grow in y'all's relationship and walk with God. And to never forget God the same way that Solomon echoed in Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Like the last chapter of Ecclesiastes. Because I feel like when it comes to mentorships and when it comes to support systems, the one thing that people forget and they ignore so much is that you have the ability to affect people's lives, whether you realize it or not. So, you being indecisive or double minded about something can affect people negatively. You not being there, as much. I can understand if you're super busy with something, but if you're not busy and you're choosing to not care, stuff like that can affect people. You ignoring, the trauma of another person or whatever the case may be, specific behaviors that you have the capability to negatively affect people and shape people and mold them in negative ways to where they're wounded. So I say that, jeez, how do I put it? Yeah, so earlier, like for example, earlier I was told to go to Proverbs 18 and read verses 5 through 10, but the focal point is 5 and 10. And chapter 10 says, "The name of the Lord is a fortified tower, the righteous run to it and are safe." And just like how, with all of us as people, God, we should always have God as a tower as He protects us and keeps us out of harm's way. The same way should be applied for mentors. How, if we're in sticky situations or if we're feeling low or, we're not feeling our best or our self esteem has been crushed, we should have the ability to have that support system or those mentors to go to. And, we feel safe and we're able to confide in them about specific things and they'll give us godly wisdom or comfort. Excuse me. And then, and then also as well, just like with verse 5, it's not good because it says in verse 5, it's not good to be partial to the wicked and so deprive the innocent of justice. It's kind of like the same way with David and Samuel, and how David went to Samuel, and Samuel saw how wicked the situation was and prayed over David. I mean, he was already praying over David in general, but still, mentors, people that are mentors, or even us as mentors, we're to do the same, for other people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a super duper mega younger person, that's the mentee. It could be somebody the same age as us, as well. But the thing about it is, the thing to always think about as well is, sometimes you have some people that don't have a mentor or friends or a support system and so on, right? Like, sometimes when you don't have a support system and you don't have anybody that's there, and the people that's in your life are really the opposition, like, God, let God be your support system or that mentor. Because there's a good chunk of people in the Bible that didn't have mentors. Like Abraham, he didn't really have anybody, to kind of, he didn't have like a prophet that's like, hey, do this. Just like with Elijah and Elisha, God was Abraham's mentor. God was Noah's mentor. Hmm. And so on. Like, you definitely had people that had really good friends and mentors in the Bible, such as Esther and Mordecai. Mordecai, by technicality, could serve as Esther's mentor. Who else? There's a lot to think about. You have, geez. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for giggling so much. It's just, so every now and then, I don't know, I just be laughing here and there. And it's just, when I think about it, it's just kind of cool a little bit, because that one point that I was saying, I don't know, it kind of made me giggle and it made me smile, because it really is a genuine cool thing. When I had went to that verse, I'm like, that's crazy. I ain't even think about it that way. I ain't even think about, I ain't think about it that way. About how, just like God, just like the name of the Lord is a tower or a fort, having the right people in your life, especially people that give you godly wisdom and so on, just having those people there also can make you feel just as equally safe, because those are people that God put in your life to steer you in the right direction and also give you comfort as well. But first and foremost, God should always be like number one in your life, period. But I don't know, just thinking about it, I don't know, it cheers me up. It cheers me up a lot. But the main point that I'll say is, it's always important to have, a good support system. It's always important to have good mentors in your life. And I don't mean people that call themselves good mentors. I'm saying people that genuinely are mentors, and they don't have to call themselves good mentors. It's the people that they helped and that they gave comfort to. All of these people can give a testament of the impact of how, the impact that said people have had in their lives. And also, I say all this to also say, if you're a mentor or older sibling or whatever the case may be, we're all human beings, and we make specific choices, sadly. But at the end of the day, let everything you do be intentional, because the decisions that we make it doesn't just affect us, but it also affects the people around us. So let everything you do be intentional. If you're an older sibling and you know that you don't really have as great of a relationship or something, do something with your siblings. I'm real big on that. I'm real big on that. Like I love my little brother and sister to death. Like even when even though I'm introverted, I don't like to leave the house like that. If they want to go do something, I'll stop everything to go do it. But at the same time, I gotta pray about whether or not it's good to do that specific thing. But I'll go and do it. Just because I care about them, and I want them to understand that I want to be that fortified tower, you know, for my siblings, just human wise, to where they feel safe and they can talk to me about specific things. And then I can also steer them in the right direction that God wants them to go down. And that's not just with my siblings, but that's just anybody in general. Cause I don't know, it's just like when it comes to support systems and when it comes to mentorships, like it's just like I said with the last episode, one of the greatest things to have is humility. Like humility and honesty, every time, every single time. But aside from that, aside from that, I will talk to you guys in the next episode. All right, bye guys.